Alrighty, so earlier today we talked about the Columbus Crew in terms of their road to MLS Cup. Now we're going to talk about LAFC in terms of their road to MLS Cup. And to say that their road to MLS Cup is a long one is an understatement. I mean, it has been a really long season this year for LAFC. In fact, I think they must have broke the record in terms of the most game that a team has ever played in a single season. Because when I count up all of these games in totals, heading into this MLS Cup, they're going to be playing in their 55th game of the regular season, and this is in a span of eight months too. Like if you do the math, they're basically playing 6 games every single month in average, and that there's times where they're basically playing every 3 days. And I'm pretty sure those LAFC players didn't realize that. Oh, we're not playing Wednesday in some of this week because even though they've been playing so many games, were actually weeks that they had a whole week off, but it was not much. And that what's also very impressive in terms of LAFC run back to MLS Cup is the fact that normally when you have this many games in a short amount of period, that's going to really test your depth and your roster. And we have said before that MLS teams simply cannot be able to compete in all the competition with the restriction that is going on with the roster rules right now. But yet, LAFC was able to power through it and able to figure out solution. Though I will say that they did try not to play in every single competition in terms of putting their best team. I mean, in the U.S. Open Cup, they pretty much punt that competition, and yet they were still able to play one extra U.S. Open Cup game. But that being said, their season started back in March 4th because their first game against LAFC at the Rose Bowl was postponed. And I think it was because of I think was it because of wildfire, or it might have been flooding. That was the reason why they couldn't play at the Rose Bowl. But nevertheless, that game was postponed to the 4th of July, and the first game at home was against the Portland Timbers, and they won that one 3-2 win against the Portland Timbers. LAFC actually got off to a really good start to the season. And then in their first game in the CCL round of 16, they won 3-0 on the road against Alajuelense. And keep in mind, this is a Alajuelense team that is the champion of Costa Rica, and a team that is not easy to just go on the road to win. I mean, historically, MLS team has never done well when they have to go on the road, especially in Central America, to play a CCL game in early season. But LAFC just basically come in there, and it feels like it was a piece of cake for them, winning 3-0 on the road. And that would be big too, because after they were able to win 4-0 against New England in the next match, well, they actually lost their home fixture against Alajuelense. Though I will say that I feel like maybe they kind of took the foot off the gas a little bit and maybe take Alajuelense a little bit too lightly, because they kind of did have to sweat it out with them losing 2-0 at one point, and eventually did get a goal to at least give the fans a little bit of breathing thing space, because I'm pretty sure when it was 2-0, all those LAFC fans were very nervous that LAFC was going to have a massive collapse. But they were able to move on into the next round despite losing that game. And then they drew 0-0 against the Seattle Sounders before winning 2-1 at home against FC Dallas. They did drew 0-0 against the Colorado Rapids. Yeah, that definitely is not one of the better resort. I mean, I mean, back then Colorado was still a resilient team, but yeah, drawing 0-0 to the Colorado Rapids, even if it's on the road, definitely not considered to be a good resort. But what is a good resort is winning 3-0 on the road against the Vancouver Whitecaps in the first leg of the CCL quarterfinal, before doing the same thing to Austin FC. And then they did the same thing to Vancouver again in the second leg on April 11th. Notice we're still in April right now. That just shows you how many games that LAFC have been playing, and that they're pretty much playing every 3 days in terms of the schedule, except for the period between March 18th and March 25th. And then on April 16th, they played their first El Tráfico of the season against the Galaxy, and they won that one 3-2 on the road against the Galaxy, before it was a 1-1 draw against Nashville. And then in the semifinal of the CONCACAF Champions League, they drew 1-1 against the Philadelphia Union, but they did win 3-0 at home against the Philadelphia Union to move on into the final of CCL. But on May 6th, this is when they suffered their first loss of the season. So up to this point, they were perfect in terms of their run in the regular season, but came to an end to the San Jose Earthquakes. And again, this was unexpected. I did not expect the Quakes were going to get a win against the best team in the Western Conference at that point. Well, actually, no, the best team I think it was St. Louis City, but LAFC was still unbeaten. I didn't think they were the first team to hand them the first loss. Though the Quakes have had histories in terms of handing teams their first loss of the season, and that was definitely one of the most more memorable win for the Quakes this season, but definitely not one for LAFC. They lost that one, and you also wonder maybe is that due to some of the hangover that they had after getting a big 3-0 win against LA or against the Philadelphia Union in the second leg of the semifinal. Then we go to the round of 32, and I actually attended this U.S. Open Cup game. I did a Sports Hop series episode about this where they play against Monterey Bay and they won 5-4 in a PK shootout in a game where they basically didn't even play their first team. Like they basically played their second team. You might as well just call it Monterey Bay FC versus LAFC 2, and yet somehow, despite the fact that they had LAFC 2 players, they're still able to prevail and win in the PK shootout, and that was a dramatic game too because it looked like they were actually going to win it in regulation too, only for Monterey Bay to score a goal late and then take the lead in extra time. It looked like they had all the momentum, but LAFC, as they have shown the resilience, even down to their reserve player, able to come back and able to win it in a PK shootout. Then on May 13th, they won 3-0 on the road against RSL before drawing 1-1 against Sporting KC. They did get the revenge on the Quakes by winning 2-1 at home against the Quakes before in the round of 16 of the U.S. Open Cup in another El Trafico. They did lose 2-0 to the Galaxy, but keep in mind LAFC wasn't really playing their regular starter even in that El Trafico. It was pretty clear that their priorities in terms of competition was not at the U.S. Open Cup. But what their priority was definitely in terms of the CONCACAF Champions League final. And in the first leg, they lost 2-1 to Leon, but that actually turns out to be an advantage for LAFC because they look like with that away goal that Denise Bowanga scored, it looked like things were gonna go well for them of just getting a goal in that second leg, and they basically win the tie. Didn't happen though. They lost 1-0 in that game against Leon, and that again, this is where unfortunately I have to bring back in terms of at this point there was still the narrative of well LAFC are still continuing this bit of a legacy of failure. Well, I wouldn't say the legacy of failure, but kind of the big game kind of choker mentality that we've seen them before, where this was a chance for them to finally lift the last trophy that they've been wanting or at least the trophy that they've been wanting to get. This actually is not the last trophy that they wanted. They still haven't won the U.S. Open Cup, but it's definitely a trophy that they've been wanting to get their hands on for a long time, and they missed out on it, losing in that game against Leon and pretty much losing the tie. And then on June 7th, they drew 0-0 against Atlanta United before losing 4-0 against the Houston Dynamo and then losing 1-0 against the Houston Dynamo. So this is kind of what we thought was going to happen, where when you lose in such a crushing way in a CCL final, is that going to linger into league plays? Well, it kind of hit for a little bit in terms of the next three games, but they were able to bounce back by winning 2-1 on the road against Sporting KC before winning 1-0 at home against Seattle. They did lose on the road against the Vancouver Whitecaps. This is where Vancouver kind of started to have the better of LAFC in terms of regular season play and probably want revenge for what happened in terms of the quarterfinal matchup in the CONCACAF Champions League. But as the calendar moved to July, they did lose 2-0 to FC Dallas before the Galaxy got their revenge in terms of the El Trafico by winning 2-1 against LAFC, and then LAFC drew 1-1 against the San Jose Earthquakes. So yeah, their form was still kind of a little bit shaky as we head into July. They did win 3-0 against St. Louis, and that was definitely a big win because St. Louis was definitely flying high up to this point. And then on the final game before the Leeds Cup break, they did drew 1-1 against Minnesota. Now, in the Leeds Cup, Keep in mind because they won MLS Cup last year, they don't have to play in the group stage and automatically qualify for the knockout round, which is a much needed break for them because up to this point they have played I think around 30 plus games already into the season. I think they played like 35 games up to this point. That's pretty much an entire MLS regular season that they have just play in terms of the amount of games that they have. And we're still in July, right now. But in terms of the round of 32, they absolutely crushed FC Juarez. 7-1 was the result before winning 4-0 against RSL. But then in the game against Monterrey, and this again in a big game this is where the big game Joker narrative came back to haunt LAFC. They had a 2-0 lead in that game and just pretty much hit the self-destruction button in the last 15 minutes, losing 3-2 in that game against Monterrey. Before on August 23rd, how will they respond in terms of coming back into to league play? Well, they won. They won 4-0 against the Colorado Rapids. That at that point was kind of a much needed win because after just kind of a devastating loss that they had in the quarterfinal. It would be interesting to see whether does that linger into league plays, though it kind of did when you look at some of the resort that was going on because after that in terms of August 28th this is where they started to go on a really bad run. They lost 2-1 to Charlotte FC, and actually I think I got the wrong team here because I don't recall Minnesota actually beat LAFC this season. So let me just double check here. Oh, actually, it's not Minnesota. Actually, Miami. That's the team. I, I didn't. Even, that's kind of embarrassing that sometimes I don't even recognize my handwriting because I don't recall Minnesota ever beating LAFC this year. It was actually Miami that won that, but that was kind of part of the Messi mania that was at its peak. But then they lost 2-0 to the Portland Timbers, and they did get an El Trafico win against the Galaxy, which at that point it looked like that was a turning point for them. But then they drew 0-0 to St. Louis and then drew 0-0 to the Philadelphia Union. And then they drew 0-0 in the Confidence Cup against Tigres before losing in the PK shootout in that one. And then they lost 1-0 at home against RSL. So this is where they've approached almost 400 plus minutes since the last goal that was scored. And again, this is what I'm seeing when I look at LAFC season. It's kind of similar to what we saw with NYCFC a couple of years ago when when their MLS Cup run they kind of endured a goal drought near the end of the season and looked like things were falling apart. Even there were times where NYCFC fans were calling Ronnie Daly heads because of it, but they rebounded time and that they were able to win all the way and eventually winning MLS Cup. And it seems like we're maybe seeing the same narrative with LAFC because after that 1-0 loss against RSL at home, they won 5-1 against Minnesota. And as a Minnesota United fan, I apologize to any Western Conference team the fact that we gave confidence to LAFC because that game was really the turning point where it seems like they got their mojo back. It seems like the attack is back in force because the following game they once again scored a ton of goals too. 4-2 win on the road against Austin FC before drawing 1-1 against the Vancouver Whitecaps. But heading into MLS Cup playoff in the first round and in game one, they won 5-2 against the Whitecaps, and then they controversially won 1-0 in game two. Again, Whitecaps fan, and certainly Vanni Sartini is still upset to this day because of the controversial penalty. But nevertheless, they move on into the conference semifinal where they were able to grind out a 1-0 road win against Seattle, and then in the conference final they had a relatively comfortable 2-0 win against the Houston Dynamo. That's where they are right now in terms of MLS Cup and are looking to try to become the first team since their crosstown rival, LA Galaxy, is the last team to defend their MLS Cup crown. But just like what we saw in 2020 when Seattle made it back to MLS Cup and they play against the Columbus Crew, they lost that game. And that, coming into this one, I think circumstances is going to be a little bit different. I mean, again, this is where I'm going to go back to what I said earlier of the fact that, LAFC, you would think that they might have the advantage in this one because of the fact that Columbus is a team that likes to have the ball and likes to push man forward. And LAFC, that kind of plays right in their hands because if they can hit the transition, they can potentially call Columbus at times, we've seen in the playoffs. But that being said, you can also say that because of the fact that LAFC is playing on the road, and road team in terms of MLS Cup has not been very good. When you look at the past decade or so, I think only NYCFC is the only road team that I've known in the past 7 MLS Cup that has been able to win it, and especially of how good Columbus has been in terms of their attacking force. Should be a very interesting matchup, and it will be very interesting to see how that, of course, is going to play out. But one thing I will say is that LAFC has kind of proved that yeah, this sometimes, despite the fact that we have tons of games that has happened, which is like 50 plus game, still we're able to get ourselves into the biggest game of the season in MLS Cup, and that kind of prove to a point where sometimes there are going to be teams where just because they made a deep run in CCL and play a bunch of games doesn't mean that they of course burn out too much. Now, to every fan that said that of course is maybe an outlier. I do agree in some sorts where you usually do not see this happen often, where a team can play this many games and yet they're still able to reach the biggest game. And that's all credit in terms of this LAFC team, in terms of this front office too, really putting a really good squad and really putting a good depth in terms of their squad to be able to compete in the highest level despite playing just so many games this season. But that being said, it will be interesting to see whether they can finish it shit off against the Columbus Crew. And mind you, they actually have not won a trophy this season, despite the fact that they had their chances in terms of winning the trophy. They had the chance in the CONCACAF Champions League. They had a chance in the Confidence Cup. They definitely had a chance in the Leeds Cup too. I'm pretty sure that even though I know for LAFC, you would think that they don't have a lot of pressure, knowing the fact that they just won MLS Cup in the previous year. You could say that there are definitely some pressure to defend the crown, mainly because they have always failed in terms of the final hurdle this season in terms of these big cup competition, and we'll see if that, of course, is the case, or are they going to be doing something that we have not seen in MLS in over a decade now, which is a back champion. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of this video. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.